Welcome to her journey, where every story reveals the strength that lies within us all. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Sometimes the people we trust most become the ones who hurt us deepest. But here's what I've learned. Underestimating someone, especially someone who has nothing left to lose, is the gravest mistake you can make. Don't just listen and leave. Hit subscribe so you'll never miss another story that speaks to your soul. These are real stories about real people finding their power in the darkest moments. Ring that notification bell because every story we share might be the one that changes everything for you. This is my story. This is my journey. And by the end, you'll understand why some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. Sometimes the worst news comes on the most ordinary days. The fluorescent lights in Dr. Kelly's office buzzed with that particular frequency that made everything feel surreal. I sat in the familiar chair, the same one I'd occupied for 3 previous visits, each one bringing me closer to this moment. At 75, I thought I'd heard every kind of bad news life could deliver. I was wrong. "Martha, I won't sugarcoat this," Dr. Kelly said, her hands folded on the desk between us. The manila folder with my name on it seemed too thin to contain something so devastating. "The biopsy results confirm our suspicions. You have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's aggressive, and it's already metastasized to your lungs and liver." The words hung in the air like smoke. I remember thinking how strange it was that such life-altering news could be delivered in such a sterile, ordinary room. There were motivational posters on the walls, kittens hanging from tree branches with phrases like, "Hang in there," and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. "How long?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Dr. Kelly hesitated, and in that pause I saw my death sentence. "With aggressive chemotherapy, we might be able to give you 6 months to a year. Without treatment." She trailed off, but we both knew what that meant. I nodded, absorbing the information like I was taking notes in a college lecture. What would the treatment involve? It would be intensive. Multiple rounds of chemotherapy, possible radiation. The side effects would be significant: nausea, fatigue, hair loss, weakened immune system. And Martha, I need to be honest with you about the costs. Even with Medicare, you're looking at substantial out-of-pocket expenses. Easily $30,000 to $40,000, possibly more. $30,000 to $40,000. The exact amount I had saved over the past 15 years. You see, I'd always been careful with money. After my husband Robert died 8 years ago, I lived frugally, saving every penny I could. I clipped coupons, shop sales, drove my old Honda until it practically fell apart. I saved because I knew this day might come. Cancer runs in my family. Took my mother at 68, my sister at 71. I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. "Dr. Kelly," I said, sitting up straighter, "I have the money. I've been saving for exactly this situation." Her face brightened with relief. So many of her patients couldn't afford treatment, and I could see the weight of those conversations in the lines around her eyes. "That's wonderful, Martha. That gives us real options. We can start treatment as early as next week if you'd like." As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope that all those years of careful planning, all those small sacrifices had been worth it. I had $42,318 in my savings account. I checked that morning, as I did every morning, a habit left over from years of financial uncertainty. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my small 2-bedroom house. It wasn't much, needed a new roof, the front steps were cracking, and the kitchen faucet had been dripping for months. But it was mine, paid off completely, and it had been home to 40 years of memories with Robert. That evening, I called my daughter Lily. "Mom, what's wrong? You never call this late." It was 7:30. "I saw Dr. Kelly today. I have cancer, Lily. It's bad. There was a pause. Not the pause of someone processing devastating news, but the pause of someone calculating how this might affect their life. How bad? Stage 4. Pancreatic. Dr. Kelly says with treatment, I might have 6 months to a year. Might. Well, nothing's guaranteed, but, Mom, you're 75. Maybe it's time to just, accept things. These treatments are brutal. Do you really want to spend your last months sick from chemo? I gripped the phone tighter. I want to fight, Lily. I have the money saved for treatment. I'm not ready to give up. Money? What money? I've been saving for years. I have over $40,000. Dr. Kelly says that should cover most of the treatment costs. Another pause. This one felt different. That's good, Mom. I'm glad you're prepared. But something in her tone made me uneasy. I'd raised Lily, knew all her vocal inflections. This wasn't relief or support I was hearing. This was a calculation. Can I give Tyler news? She asked. He'd want to know about his grandmother. Tyler. My 23-year-old grandson. Lily's son from her first marriage. The boy I'd helped raise when Lily was working 2 jobs to make ends meet. The child I'd read bedtime stories to, taught to ride a bike, sent birthday cards with $20 bills every year even when I could barely afford it. Of course. Tell him I love him. I will, Mom.
Try to get some rest.
After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the last light fade from the sky. The house felt different somehow, as if the diagnosis had changed the very air inside it. I pulled out a notebook and began making lists, always my way of processing overwhelming situations. Treatment schedule, transportation to appointments, medications, dietary changes, support system. Under the support system, I wrote, Lily? Tyler? Friends. The question marks felt ominous. That night, I dreamed of Robert. He was sitting in his favorite chair, the green recliner I donated to Goodwill after he died, because I couldn't bear to look at it empty. You're stronger than you know, Martha, he said in the dream. But be careful who you trust. I woke with tears on my cheeks and the strange feeling that he'd been trying to warn me about something.
The
deepest cuts come from those we trust most. Tuesday morning, I woke early as I always did. The cancer was already making itself known. A gnawing ache in my side, a fatigue that seemed to seep into my bones. But I was determined to start treatment immediately. Every day mattered now. I dressed carefully in my good blue dress and pearl earrings. If I was going to withdraw money for my cancer treatment, I wanted to look dignified, respectable. At 75, I'd learned that appearance mattered, especially when dealing with money. The bank was busy for Tuesday morning. I waited patiently in line, watching young mothers juggle children and paperwork, businessmen checking their phones impatiently. Life moving forward while mine hung in the balance. When I reached the teller window, I smiled at the young woman behind the counter. She had kind eyes and reminded me of Lily at that age, before life had hardened her edges. Good morning. I'd like to withdraw $8,000 from my savings account, please. I'd calculated that this would cover my first round of treatments and medications. The teller, whose name tag read Jessica, typed on her computer. Then she frowned. Typed some more. Her frown deepened. Ma'am, I'm showing a balance of only $236.45 in this savings account. The words didn't make sense. I'm sorry, what did you say? Your current balance is $236.45. Are you sure you have the right account number? My hands started trembling. That can't be right. There was over $42,000 in that account. I checked it yesterday online. Jessica's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Let me pull up your transaction history. When was the last time you accessed this account? I check the balance online every morning, but I haven't made any withdrawals in months. Jessica studied her screen, scrolling through data I couldn't see. Ma'am, I'm seeing multiple large withdrawals over the past week. Several PayPal transfers and ATM withdrawals. All authorized with your debit card. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. PayPal transfers?
I don't even know what PayPal is.
Can you tell me who received the transfers? The transfers went to an account under the name Tyler Freeman. The ATM withdrawals were made from various locations around town. Tyler Freeman. My grandson. Ma'am, are you all right? You look pale. Would you like to sit down? I must have nodded because suddenly I was in a chair in the bank manager's office, a cup of water in my hands. The manager, Mr. Peters, was explaining something about unauthorized transactions and fraud protection, but his words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Tyler had stolen my money. My cancer treatment money. My survival. Mrs. Freeman, we need to report this as potential elder financial abuse. I can start the paperwork right now. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Let me talk to my family first. Mr. Peters looked skeptical. Ma'am, in cases like this, family members are often the perpetrators. You need to protect yourself.
Please.
Just give me 24 hours. He reluctantly agreed, and I walked out of the bank in a daze. Everything looked the same strip mall, the same parking lot, the same blue sky, but my world had completely shifted. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened.
My phone rang.
It was Dr. Kelly's office, calling to schedule my first treatment appointment. I'm sorry, I told the receptionist, my voice barely a whisper. I need to postpone. There's been a complication. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my checkbook. I'd written the balance so carefully just yesterday morning, $42,318.45. Now it was gone. All of it. I thought about calling the police immediately, but something held me back. Tyler was family. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he'd borrowed it for an emergency and planned to pay it back. Maybe Lily knew about it and could explain. Maybe I was being foolish. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I knew the truth. Tyler had stolen from me. Not borrowed, stolen. And somewhere in my gut, I suspected Lily knew about it. The phone rang. Tyler's number showed on the caller ID.
Gang?
His voice was cheerful, casual. Mom told me about your diagnosis.
I'm so sorry.
How are you feeling?
I'm
managing, I said carefully. Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me.
Of course, Grandma.
What is it? Have you been using my debit card? The pause was brief, but it was there. A tiny hesitation that told me everything I needed to know. Your debit card?
No, Grandma.
Why would I have your debit card? He was lying. My own grandson was looking me in the eye, metaphorically, and lying to me while I was dying of cancer. Tyler, my savings are gone. Over $40,000. The bank says it was transferred to your PayPal account. Another pause. This one longer. Grandma, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe someone stole your identity. That happens to older people a lot. Older people. He said it like I was too senile to manage my own affairs. The transfers were made with my debit card, Tyler. From my account to your PayPal. I really don't know anything about that, Grandma. Maybe you should call the bank again. Sometimes they make mistakes. I closed my eyes. This was my grandson. The boy I'd loved unconditionally for 23 years. The child I'd sacrificed for, worried about, celebrated with. And he was lying to me about stealing my cancer treatment money. Tyler, that money was for my chemotherapy. Without it, I can't afford treatment. I'm sure it'll work out, Grandma. These things usually do. I have to go now. I'm meeting some friends. Love you. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone long after the dial tone began. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about love, about loyalty, crumbled around me in that moment. But the real blow was yet to come. Some wounds never heal because they're inflicted by the people who are supposed to protect us. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing between disbelief and growing anger. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to confront Lily directly. If Tyler had stolen from me, she needed to know. She needed to help me get my money back. Lily lived in Meadowbrook Estates, the expensive part of town where all the houses looked like they belonged in magazines. Her condo was minimalist and modern, all white walls and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been used. It had always felt cold to me, but that morning it felt arctic. She answered the door in designer yoga clothes, a green smoothie in her hand.
Mom?
What are you doing here? You look terrible. I walked past her into the living room without being invited. We need to talk about Tyler. What about Tyler? She settled onto her white leather sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. He stole my money, Lily. My cancer treatment money. All of it. I watched her face carefully, looking for shock, concern, and anger on my behalf. What I saw instead was something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't surprised. Oh, that, she said, taking a sip of her smoothie.
Oh, that?
Lily, he stole over $40,000 from me. The money I saved for years. Money I need to survive. She shrugged. Mom, Tyler needed it. He had some debts to pay off. I stared at her. Debts? What kind of debts? Does it matter? The point is, he needed the money. And you knew about this? Of course I knew. I gave him your debit card information. The words hit me like a physical blow. You what? Tyler came to me last week, stressed out about some money he owed. I remembered you mentioning your savings account, so I got your card information from your purse when I was over for dinner on Sunday.
Sunday.
3 days after my diagnosis. She'd come over with flowers and sympathy, hugged me, and told me she'd be there for whatever I needed. And she'd stolen from me. Lily, that money was for my chemotherapy. I'm dying, and that was my only chance at treatment. She set down her smoothie and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. Almost cruel. Mom, let's be realistic here. You're 75 years old with stage 4 cancer. Even with treatment, what are the odds you'll survive? Maybe 6 months, maybe a year of being sick and miserable. Tyler has his whole life ahead of him. I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to accept reality. You're not going to beat this. Why waste all that money on treatments that probably won't work anyway? At least Tyler can use it to get his life on track. Get his life on track? By stealing from his dying grandmother. It's not stealing if you're going to leave it to us anyway. The casual cruelty of it stunned me into silence. This was my daughter, the child I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who I'd sat up with through fevers and heartbreaks. Besides, she continued, Tyler told me you gave him permission to use the money. That's a lie. Is it?
You're older now, Mom.
Sometimes older people get confused about what they said or didn't say.
She was gaslighting me.
My own daughter was gaslighting me while defending the theft of my life savings. I want my money back, Lily. I want it back today. She laughed. Actually laughed. It's gone, Mom. Tyler's already spent most of it. New car, paying off credit cards, some investments. It's not like there's a pile of cash sitting around. Then sell the car. Cancel the investments. Figure it out. I'm not doing that. Tyler deserves a chance at a good life. And I deserve a chance to live. Do you, though? The question hung in the air between us like poison gas. What did you just say to me? Lily stood up, smoothing down her yoga pants. I said what I said. You've had your life, Mom. 75 years. Tyler's only 23. Who deserves the money more, someone who's going to die anyway, or someone with 50 years ahead of him? I stood up too, my whole body shaking with rage and heartbreak. Get out of my way. Where are you going?
Home.
To call the police and report both of you for elder abuse and theft. Good luck with that, Lily said, smirking. Tyler will just say you gave him permission and forgot. Two young people's word against one old woman with cancer. Who do you think they'll believe? I walked to the door, my legs unsteady. As I reached for the handle, Lily called after me. Mom? When you die, I want you to remember that I tried to make this easy for you. Tyler and I are your only family. We're all you have. So think carefully about what you do next. I turned back to look at her. You're right about one thing, Lily. You and Tyler are all I had. Past tense. I drove home through tears so thick I could barely see the road. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my place in the world, had been shattered in the space of one conversation. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think rationally. I could call the police, but Lily was probably right about who they'd believe. I could try to pursue it legally, but I didn't have money for lawyers, and I didn't have time for long court battles. Or I could do something else entirely. I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled out an old shoebox from the back corner. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was something Robert had given me years ago. A business card for a private investigator named Marcus Webb. If anything ever happens to me, Robert had said, if you ever need help and can't trust anyone else, call this man. He owes me a favor. I'd never asked what kind of favor. Robert had been a quiet man with a complicated past, and some things were better left unquestioned. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. After 4 rings, a gravelly voice answered.
Webb.
Mr. Webb, my name is Martha Freeman. My husband Robert gave me your number years ago. He said you owed him a favor. A long pause. Robert Freeman's widow? Yes. What do you need, Mrs. Freeman? I need to disappear. Another pause. That's a big favor. It's for a big cause. Meet me tomorrow at Denny's on 5th Street. 2 o'clock. Come alone, and bring everything you have on the people who wronged you. How did you know? Because Robert Freeman wouldn't have given you my number unless someone had wronged you badly. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Freeman. He hung up. I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, and for the first time since my diagnosis, I smiled. Lily and Tyler thought they'd destroyed a helpless old woman. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd awakened something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Something that Robert had always known was there, hidden beneath decades of domesticity and maternal love. They'd awakened my capacity for revenge. Sometimes you have to die to discover who you really are. Marcus Webb looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a private investigator. Grizzled, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. He was waiting in a corner booth at Denny's when I arrived, a cup of black coffee growing cold in front of him. Mrs. Freeman? He stood as I approached, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that reminded me of Robert. Thank you for meeting me. He gestured for me to sit. You look like your husband. Same eyes. Same steel underneath. You knew Robert well? Well enough. He saved my life in Vietnam. Took a bullet meant for me. Webb rolled up his sleeve, showing me a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. Shrapnel from the same explosion that should have killed me. Robert dragged me half a mile to safety while I was bleeding out. I'd never known this story. Robert rarely talked about the war. What did Robert tell you about me? I asked. Webb smiled, and it transformed his whole face. He said you were the strongest person he'd ever met, but you'd never had a reason to show it. He also said if anyone ever hurt you, they'd better pray the law got to them before you did.
Smart man.
The smartest. Now, tell me what happened. I told him everything. The cancer diagnosis, the stolen money, Lily's betrayal, Tyler's lies. Webb took notes in a small notebook, his expression growing darker with each detail. "How much time do we have?" he asked when I finished. "Dr. Kelly says 6 months to a year with treatment. Without it." I shrugged. "And you're sure about what you want to do?" "I'm dying anyway, Mr. Webb. But I'll be damned if I'm going to die quietly while they get away with this." He nodded approvingly. "Call me Marcus. And Mrs. Freeman, your husband was right about you." Over the next week, Marcus introduced me to a world I never knew existed. People who could create new identities, establish bank accounts, arrange untraceable money transfers. The underground network of those who helped others disappear. "The key," Marcus explained, "is to die before you disappear. Legally speaking." I liquidated everything. Sold my house to a cash buyer Marcus recommended, someone who asked no questions and closed quickly. Sold my car, my furniture, everything except a few precious photographs and Robert's wedding ring. The total came to just over $68,000. "Not bad for a fresh start," Marcus said when we counted it. But money was only part of the transformation. The real change was internal. I dyed my silver hair dark brown, almost black. Cut it into a sharp bob that took 20 years off my appearance. Started wearing makeup again for the first time since Robert's funeral, not the gentle pastels I'd worn as a grandmother, but bold colors that emphasized my cheekbones and made my eyes look fierce. I bought new clothes. Gone were the floral print dresses and comfortable cardigans. In their place, sleek black pants, fitted blazers, boots with heels that gave me height and authority. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Martha Freeman was a grandmother. I told my reflection, "You're something else entirely." The physical transformation was accompanied by something deeper. Years of suppressed anger, decades of swallowed words and accepted slights, rose to the surface like water finding cracks in a dam. I'd spent 75 years being what other people needed me to be: dutiful daughter, loyal wife, giving mother, loving grandmother. Now I was going to be something new, an agent of justice. Marcus helped me establish my new identity. Margaret Ellis, widow, retired librarian from Portland. Social security number, driver's license, bank accounts, credit history, all meticulously crafted and completely legal if you knew the right people. "The beauty of this identity," Marcus explained, "is that it's boring. Retired librarians don't attract attention. They're invisible, which is exactly what you want to be." While my new identity was being established, I spent my time doing reconnaissance. I rented different cars each day and followed Tyler and Lily, learning their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. Tyler was living exactly as I'd expected, expensively and carelessly. The new BMW convertible he'd bought with my money was parked outside expensive restaurants, nightclubs, his girlfriend's apartment. He was posting constantly on social media, photos of expensive meals, trips to Las Vegas, designer clothes. What he didn't know was that I'd created fake social media accounts to follow him. Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, platforms I'd never understood before but learned quickly. Tyler was documenting his entire life online, including his spending of my stolen money. Lily was harder to track because she was more careful, but she was also more predictable. Botox appointments every 3 months, weekly trips to expensive spas, long lunches with her wealthy friends where they gossiped about everyone in town. What neither of them knew was that their grandmother was watching, learning, planning. 2 weeks after my meeting with Marcus, I called Dr. Kelly's office. "I've decided not to pursue treatment," I told her nurse. "I want to spend my remaining time at peace." "Are you sure, Mrs. Freeman? Dr. Kelly really thinks the chemotherapy could buy you significant time." "I'm sure. Thank you for everything." I hung up and smiled. Martha Freeman was already starting to die. 3 days later, I had a meeting with a lawyer Marcus had recommended. Not for a will. I had no intention of leaving anything to Lily or Tyler, but for something else entirely. I want to donate everything to charity when I die, I told him. The American Cancer Society, specifically. That's very generous, Mrs. Freeman. It seems appropriate. What I didn't tell him was that Martha Freeman wouldn't be dying poor. She'd be dying owning nothing, because everything had already been transferred to Margaret Ellis. The final step was the hardest, cutting all ties with my old life. I deleted my email accounts, canceled my phone service, closed my social media accounts. To anyone who cared to look, Martha Freeman was withdrawing from the world, preparing for death. Only Marcus knew the truth. On a rainy Tuesday morning in October, exactly 6 weeks after Tyler had stolen my money, I walked into the offices of the local newspaper. I'd like to place an obituary, I told the receptionist. I'm sorry for your loss. What's the name of the deceased? Martha Jean Freeman. I handed her the obituary I'd written. Martha Jean Freeman, 75, passed away peacefully at home surrounded by family after a brief battle with cancer. She was preceded in death by her beloved husband Robert. She is survived by her daughter Lily and grandson Tyler. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the American Cancer Society. Private services have been held. This will run in tomorrow's paper, the receptionist said. Perfect. As I walked out of the newspaper office, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Martha Freeman, the woman who'd been betrayed and abandoned by her family, was dead. In her place stood Margaret Ellis, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. That evening, I sat in my small apartment across town, rented under my new identity, and watched the sunset through unfamiliar windows. Tomorrow, the world would believe Martha Freeman was dead. Tyler and Lily would read the obituary and assume they'd gotten away with everything. They had no idea their real punishment was just beginning. I opened my laptop and began typing. If I was going to destroy them, I needed to understand them completely. Their financial records, their social media activity, their deepest secrets and greatest fears. Tyler, I'd learned, owed money to some very unsavory people. His gambling debts were extensive, and my stolen money had only temporarily solved his problems. He was also cheating on his girlfriend with her best friend, a fact he'd stupidly documented in text messages I'd managed to intercept. Lily's secrets were more complex but equally damaging. Her Botox business wasn't properly licensed, she was committing tax fraud, and she'd been having an affair with her business partner for 2 years while her husband thought they were trying to save their marriage. Both of them had built their lives on lies, theft, and deception. I was about to show them what happened when those foundations crumbled. Marcus had taught me something important. Revenge isn't about one big explosion. It's about 1,000 small cuts, applied precisely and persistently until your target bleeds out. I was about to become very good at applying small cuts. And the beauty of being dead was that no one would ever suspect Martha Freeman's ghost was the one holding the knife. The dead have advantages the living don't understand. Being dead was remarkably liberating. 3 days after my obituary ran, I sat in a coffee shop across from Tyler's apartment building, watching him through the window. He was on his phone, animated, probably telling someone about his grandmother's convenient death. I sipped my latte and planned his destruction. The first strike came at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday. Tyler's phone buzzed with a notification. A new TikTok video had been posted to his account, except he hadn't posted it. The video showed him at a party 2 weeks earlier, drunk and laughing, holding up his phone to show off his new BMW. "Check out my ride." His intoxicated voice slurred from the phone's speaker. "Bought it with my dead grandma's cancer money. She was gonna waste it on chemo anyway." In the background, his equally drunk friends were laughing. Someone yelled, "To Grandma's medical fund," and they all raised their beer bottles in a mock toast. It was crude, heartless, and absolutely damning. The video had been posted from his own account, using his own passwords. Tyler had no idea how, because he'd never seen this particular recording before. What he didn't know was that his friend Jake, the one who'd actually filmed it, had been paid $500 by a mysterious woman to share the raw footage. By morning, the video had 20,000 views. By noon, it was trending. The comments were brutal. "This is literally stealing from a dying woman. Someone call the police." Elder abuse at its finest. "Hope karma gets you, you piece of garbage. Your grandmother is probably rolling in her grave."
Disgusting. How is this not a crime?
"Someone needs to investigate this family." Tyler spent the day frantically trying to delete the video, but screenshots had already been captured and shared across multiple platforms. His girlfriend saw it. Her parents saw it.
His boss saw it.
By evening, he'd been fired from his job at the car dealership. His girlfriend had kicked him out of her apartment. Her father, a prominent lawyer in town, had called him personally to say he'd be watching for any opportunity to press charges. But Tyler's humiliation was just the beginning. That same day, an anonymous tip reached the IRS regarding Lily's business practices. The caller reported unreported cash income, unlicensed medical procedures, and potential tax evasion. The tip included detailed records of Lily's cash transactions, copies of her unlicensed Botox purchases, and photographs of her performing procedures without proper certification. The IRS doesn't investigate every anonymous tip, but this one came with extensive documentation. Someone had done their homework. Within a week, Lily received a notice of audit. Her business bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. The state medical board launched their own inquiry into her unlicensed practice. Her malpractice insurance was suspended. "I don't understand what's happening," she told her husband Richard over dinner. "It's like someone is systematically destroying my life." She had no idea how right she was. From my invisible perch as Margaret Ellis, I watched their world begin to crumble. I'd rented a small office space and filled it with computers, printers, and surveillance equipment. Marcus had introduced me to some very talented people, hackers, social media experts, professional researchers. For the right price, they could find anyone's secrets and exploit anyone's weaknesses. Tyler's second blow came in the form of his car loan. The BMW he bought with my money was suddenly repoed from outside his gym. The bank claimed the loan had been obtained fraudulently. Someone had provided them with evidence that the down payment had been stolen from an elderly woman's account. The evidence included bank records, Tyler's own bragging video, and testimony from a witness who'd seen him celebrating his grandmother's death at a local bar. Tyler tried to fight it, but he had no legal ground to stand on. The car was gone, and he still owed $15,000 on the loan. His friends stopped answering his calls. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages from strangers who'd seen the viral video. Someone had doxed him, posted his address, phone number, and workplace online along with his grandmother's story. He moved back in with Lily, but her house wasn't the sanctuary he expected. Lily's clients had started canceling appointments after negative reviews appeared on every platform imaginable. Yelp, Google, Facebook, all filled with detailed accounts of botched procedures, infections, and unprofessional behavior. The reviews were particularly damaging because they included specific details that only someone with inside knowledge could know. Photos of swollen, infected injection sites. Stories about Lily performing procedures while intoxicated. Accounts of her refusing to provide aftercare when complications arose. "Mrs. Freeman gave me the worst Botox experience of my life," read one review. "She was clearly drunk during my appointment, kept talking about her mother dying, and when my face swelled up the next day, she wouldn't even return my calls." Another review was even more damaging. "This woman injected me with expired Botox she bought illegally online. I ended up in the ER with a severe allergic reaction." The The doctor said I was lucky not to have permanent nerve damage. Stay away. None of these reviews were true in the traditional sense, but they were all plausible enough to destroy Lily's reputation. And mixed in with the fake reviews were a few real ones from clients who'd actually had bad experiences but had been too intimidated to speak up before. The combination was lethal to her business. "Someone is targeting us," Lily told Tyler as they sat in her living room, both of them scrolling through the endless stream of negative comments and reviews. "This isn't random. Someone with a vendetta is systematically destroying our lives." "But who?" Tyler asked. "And why now? It's been weeks since Grandma died." They couldn't see the irony that their grandmother's death had actually been the beginning of their real torment, not the end of their problems. I watched them from my apartment, monitoring their phones, their emails, their social media accounts. Modern technology made surveillance almost laughably easy if you knew the right people and had the right resources. Every panicked phone call, every desperate text message, every futile attempt to restore their reputations, I saw it all. The third wave of attacks came during Tyler's court appearance for the car loan dispute. He'd hired a cheap lawyer with what little money he had left, hoping to fight the repossession. What he didn't expect was for a process server to hand him additional papers right outside the courthouse. He was being sued for elder financial abuse by the estate of Martha Freeman. The lawsuit was real, filed by a legitimate law firm and backed by extensive documentation. Bank records showing the unauthorized transfers, screenshots of his boastful social media posts, testimony from the bank employees who'd witnessed my distress when I discovered the theft. The estate was seeking full restitution plus damages, a total of over $200,000. Tyler's lawyer took one look at the evidence and advised him to settle immediately. "You can't win this," the lawyer said bluntly. "The evidence is overwhelming, and the optics are terrible. A jury will hate you." But Tyler didn't have $200,000. He didn't have $20,000. The stolen money was gone, spent on cars and parties and gambling debts that had consumed everything. That night, Tyler called Lily in a panic. "They're going to garnish my wages for the rest of my life," he sobbed into the phone. "I'll never own anything, never have anything. My credit is destroyed. No one will hire me. I'm ruined, Mom. Completely ruined." "We both are," Lily replied, her voice hollow. "My business is gone. Richard is talking about divorce, says he can't be married to someone under federal investigation. I might go to prison, Tyler, for tax evasion and practicing medicine without a license." They were both crying now, and from my hidden vantage point, I felt something I hadn't expected, a moment of doubt. These were the people I'd loved once. My daughter and grandson, broken and desperate. But then I remembered Lily's words. "You're not going to survive anyway." Tyler's casual dismissal of my life. She was going to waste it on chemo anyway. My moment of sympathy passed. The fourth assault came in the form of their deepest secrets being exposed. Tyler's girlfriend, Jessica, received an anonymous package containing printed screenshots of his text conversations with her best friend, Sarah. Explicit photos, loving messages, detailed plans for their secret meetings while Jessica was at work. The messages spanned months and revealed not just the affair, but Tyler's cruel mockery of Jessica behind her back. He'd called her desperate and clingy, had laughed about her weight gain, had told Sarah that he was only staying with Jessica because her father had money and connections. Jessica's father, the lawyer who'd already threatened Tyler, now had a personal reason to destroy him. He filed a harassment complaint, got a restraining order, and used his connections in the legal community to ensure Tyler couldn't find decent representation for any of his mounting legal problems. Lily's secrets were exposed more publicly. Photos of her with her business partner David appeared on a local gossip blog, showing them in intimate embraces at hotels around the city. The photos were timestamped and geotagged, creating an undeniable timeline of their affair. Her husband Richard saw the photos along with everyone else in their social circle. The divorce papers were filed within a week, and Richard's attorney made it clear they'd be seeking full custody of their 10-year-old daughter and maximum financial penalties for Lily's adultery. "I can't even leave the house," Lily told Tyler during one of their increasingly desperate phone calls. "Everyone is staring at me. At the grocery store, at Emma's school, everywhere I go. People are talking about us, about what we did to Grandma." "What we did?" Tyler snapped. "You're the one who gave me her card information, and you're the one who stole the money. Don't try to put this all on me." They were turning on each other now, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. Unity might have made them stronger, but isolation and mutual blame would make them easier targets. The fifth wave was more personal and more terrifying. Tyler started receiving phone calls at 3 a.m. When he answered, there was only silence, followed by the sound of an old woman crying. The calls came from blocked numbers and lasted exactly 2 minutes and 37 seconds each time. He changed his phone number. The calls continued. Lily began finding strange items in her house. A pair of reading glasses that looked like the ones her mother used to wear, left on her kitchen counter. A tube of lipstick in Martha's favorite shade of pink, placed on her bathroom sink. A handwritten recipe for apple pie in handwriting that looked disturbingly familiar, tucked under her windshield wiper. "It's like she's haunting us," Lily whispered to Tyler during one of their late-night conversations. "Like Mom is reaching out from beyond the grave to torment us." "Don't be ridiculous," Tyler replied, but his voice was shaking. "Dead people don't make phone calls or leave lipstick in your bathroom." "Then explain what's happening to us. Explain how our lives fell apart so completely and so fast." Tyler couldn't explain it because the truth was beyond his comprehension. His grandmother hadn't just died. She'd been reborn as something far more dangerous than the gentle old woman he dismissed and betrayed. From my apartment, I listened to their panicked conversations through the listening devices I'd planted in their homes. Their fear was intoxicating, but I wasn't finished with them yet. The real punishment was still to come, because being dead meant I could do things the living couldn't. I could be everywhere and nowhere. I could know their secrets, anticipate their moves, stay always one step ahead. Martha Freeman had been constrained by love, by family loyalty, by the desire to maintain relationships. Margaret Ellis had no such limitations. And I was just getting started. Fear is a living thing that grows stronger when fed. By November, Tyler and Lily's lives had become a daily nightmare, but they still didn't understand the true scope of what is happening to them. They thought they were dealing with random bad luck, anonymous enemies, maybe even supernatural vengeance. They had no idea they were being systematically destroyed by someone who knew their every weakness, their every secret, their every fear. I had become a student of my own family's destruction, and I was an excellent student. Tyler's gambling problem, which he'd hidden from everyone, became my next target. I discovered through his financial records that he owed significant money to underground poker games and sports betting operations. These weren't the kind of debts you could discharge in bankruptcy court. These were the kind that got your legs broken if you didn't pay. One of my new associates, a man Marcus introduced me to who specialized in debt collection consulting, made some strategic phone calls. Soon, Tyler's creditors learned about his viral video and his pending lawsuit. They realized that their debtor was about to become completely judgment-proof, unable to pay anyone anything. Desperate creditors don't wait patiently for their money. Tyler was leaving his gym on a Thursday evening when two large men approached him in the parking lot. "Tyler Freeman?" the larger one asked. "Yeah. Mr. Castellano wants to see you. Now." Tyler knew who Castellano was, the man who ran the high-stakes poker games Tyler had been losing at for months. This was not a social invitation. They drove him to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Castellano was waiting, a thin man in an expensive suit who spoke softly and never raised his voice. Tyler, my boy, we have a problem. You owe me $37,000, and I'm hearing troubling things about your ability to pay. I can pay, Tyler lied. I just need a little more time. Time is expensive, Tyler. And I'm hearing you don't have any money at all. Something about stealing from your dying grandmother? Very bad optics, son. Very bad for business relationships. Tyler's hands were shaking. That's been blown out of proportion. I didn't steal anything. Castellano smiled, and it was somehow more frightening than if he'd screamed. I saw the video, Tyler. Very entertaining. But here's what concerns me. If you'd steal from your own grandmother while she was dying of cancer, what does that tell me about your character? About your likelihood of paying your debts to me?
I'll pay.
I swear I'll pay. I believe you will, Castellano said, because I'm going to make sure of it. You have 2 weeks to bring me $37,000. If you don't, we're going to have a much less pleasant conversation. Tyler left the warehouse, knowing his life was in danger. But he had no way to get $37,000. His credit was destroyed, his family had disowned him, and his friends had abandoned him after the video went viral. He was completely alone. Meanwhile, Lily was facing her own escalating crisis. The IRS audit had uncovered extensive tax fraud, nearly $80,000 in unreported income over 3 years. The state medical board had suspended her license to practice any form of cosmetic procedures. Her divorce was proceeding with brutal efficiency, and Richard's attorney was painting her as an unfit mother who'd stolen from her own dying parent. But the worst part was the isolation. Their small town had completely turned against them both. The story of Martha Freeman's stolen cancer treatment money had spread through the community like wildfire, fueled by Tyler's own boastful video and the mounting evidence of their crimes. They couldn't go to restaurants without being stared at and whispered about. Lily's daughter Emma was being bullied at school by children whose parents had told them about what those Freeman people had done. Tyler couldn't find work anywhere in town. His reputation preceded him everywhere. But I wasn't content with mere social ostracism. I wanted complete destruction. The next phase involved exploiting their deepest psychological vulnerabilities. Tyler had always been afraid of ending up like his father, Lily's first husband, who died in a car accident when Tyler was 12. Tyler had been in the car that night, had survived while his father died, and had carried survivor's guilt ever since. I arranged for him to receive a package with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the night of the accident, along with a handwritten note. Like father, like son. Some people are just unlucky with cars. The note was written in handwriting that looked disturbingly similar to mine. That night, Tyler's car wouldn't start. When he opened the hood, he found his brake lines had been cut. He called the police, but they found no evidence of who might have done it. Any enemies you can think of? The officer asked. Tyler laughed bitterly. Take your pick. Lily's deepest fear was losing her daughter Emma. She'd grown up in foster care herself and had sworn Emma would never experience that kind of instability. Now, with the divorce proceedings and the criminal charges, that fear was becoming reality. She began receiving photos of Emma at school, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The photos came with notes. She's beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Lily was frantic. She hired a private security company to watch Emma, spent money she didn't have on protection she couldn't afford. She moved Emma to a different school, changed their routines, lived in constant fear. The photos stopped coming, but the psychological damage was done. Lily was having panic attacks, wasn't sleeping, was making increasingly erratic decisions that were destroying what was left of her life. What neither Tyler nor Lily knew was that all of these torments were coming from the same source. Their dead grandmother had become their most dangerous enemy, and she was using their own guilt and fear against them with surgical precision. But the masterpiece of my revenge was still to come. I'd learned that Tyler and Lily were planning to leave town. They'd finally realized that their lives in Michigan were over, that they needed to start fresh somewhere else. Lily was going to take Emma and move to California where her sister lived. Tyler was planning to go to Florida, maybe find work in construction where his reputation wouldn't follow him. They thought they could escape the consequences of their actions by running away. I couldn't allow that. The final trap was elegant in its simplicity. Through my network of contacts, I arranged for Tyler to receive an offer of legitimate employment in Phoenix, a construction job with good pay and benefits, exactly what he needed to rebuild his life. The offer came from a company that did extensive background checks, but somehow Tyler's application had been flagged as approved pending final interview. The job was real. The company was legitimate. The offer was genuine. Tyler was so grateful for this one piece of good news that he didn't question how the company had found him or why they were willing to overlook his recent troubles. He booked a flight to Phoenix for the interview, used his last credit card to pay for it, put everything he owned in storage. What Tyler didn't know was that I'd also arranged for his creditors to learn about his travel plans. Castellano's men were waiting for him at the airport. Tyler never made it to Phoenix. He never made it out of Michigan. His body was found 3 days later in a remote area outside town. The official cause of death was listed as accident during attempted debt collection. Castellano and his associates had alibis. The investigation went nowhere. Tyler Freeman, age 23, was dead, killed by the consequences of his own greed and cruelty. I felt nothing when I read his obituary in the paper. No satisfaction, no regret, no sense of closure. Tyler had made his choices, and those choices had led inevitably to this end. One down, one to go. But Lily's punishment would be different. Tyler had died quickly, probably never fully understanding why his life had collapsed so completely. Lily was going to live with full knowledge of what she'd done and what she'd lost. She was going to spend years understanding exactly how much her betrayal had cost her. Because sometimes living with the consequences is a harsher punishment than death. And I was very good at arranging consequences. Some sins require a lifetime of payment. Tyler's death should have been a warning to Lily. Instead, it became the catalyst for her complete psychological breakdown. She found out about her son's murder the same way everyone else in town did, from the morning news. The reporter described it as the apparent mob-style killing of Tyler Freeman, the young man who gained notoriety for stealing his dying grandmother's cancer treatment money. Even in death, Tyler's crime followed him. Lily collapsed in her kitchen, screaming until her neighbors called 911. She was hospitalized for 3 days under psychiatric observation, sedated and restrained while doctors tried to determine if she was a danger to herself or others. When she was released, she found that her world had continued falling apart in her absence. Richard had been granted full custody of Emma during Lily's hospitalization. The judge ruled that a mother who'd been institutionalized for mental health issues, who was under federal investigation for tax fraud, and who'd participated in stealing from her own dying parent was not fit to have unsupervised contact with a minor child. Lily was allowed supervised visits with Emma for 2 hours every other Saturday, and only if she continued with mandatory therapy and psychiatric medication. Emma, who was now 11, was terrified of her mother. The combination of the bullying at school, the constant media attention, and now Tyler's violent death had traumatized the child beyond repair. During their supervised visits, Emma barely spoke and flinched whenever Lily tried to touch her. "Why did you and Tyler take Grandma's medicine money?" Emma asked during one visit, her voice small and confused. "The kids at school say that's why she died." Lily couldn't answer. How do you explain to a child that you chose temporary financial gain over your own mother's life? How do you make an 11-year-old understand the kind of moral bankruptcy that leads to such a decision? Grandma was sick, baby. The money wouldn't have saved her. But why didn't you let her try? Lily had no answer for that, because there was no answer that didn't reveal her own monstrous selfishness. Meanwhile, the federal charges against her were proceeding. The IRS had built an airtight case for tax evasion, and the state was pursuing charges for practicing medicine without a license. Her attorney, a public defender, since she could no longer afford private counsel, advised her to plead guilty and hope for a reduced sentence. "You're looking at 3 to 5 years in federal prison," he told her bluntly. "With good behavior, maybe you'll serve 2.5. But Lily, you need to understand. When you get out, your daughter will be a teenager. She won't even remember you as her mother." That night, Lily sat in her empty house. Richard had taken most of the furniture as part of the divorce settlement and tried to figure out how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 months ago, she'd been a successful businesswoman with a loving family and a bright future. Now she was a convicted felon facing prison time, estranged from her daughter, widowed by divorce, and responsible for her own son's death. But even in her despair, Lily still didn't understand the true scope of what had happened to her family. She thought their downfall had been a series of unfortunate events triggered by their theft from her mother. She had no idea that every single catastrophe had been carefully orchestrated by someone who knew their weaknesses better than they knew themselves. The final revelation came in the form of a letter delivered to her door by hand on a cold December morning. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper, with her name written in careful script. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. The letter read, "My dearest daughter Lily, by the time you read this, Tyler will be dead, and you will have lost everything that ever mattered to you. I hope you're wondering how this happened. I hope you're lying awake at night trying to understand how your perfect plan went so wrong. Let me enlighten you. I am not dead. Martha Freeman died on paper, but I am very much alive. I have spent the last 6 months destroying your lives with the same systematic precision that you used to destroy mine. Every humiliation Tyler suffered, every business you lost, every secret that was exposed, every fear that was exploited, that was me. I orchestrated all of it. I watched you both fall apart piece by piece, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. You told me I was going to die anyway, that Tyler deserved my money more than I did, because he had his whole life ahead of him. You were wrong about that, weren't you? Tyler's life lasted exactly 6 months and 2 days after he stole from me. Mine continues. You said I should get over it when I discovered your betrayal. I did get over it, Lily. I got over loving you. I got over trusting you. I got over being the kind of person who would forgive anything for family. The key in this envelope opens a storage unit across town. Unit 247 at Secure Store on Highway 9. Inside, you'll find documentation of everything I did to you and Tyler, along with proof that I'm still alive. You'll also find something else, a choice. You can take this evidence to the police. You can tell them that your supposedly dead mother orchestrated Tyler's murder and your downfall. You can try to have me arrested for elder abuse fraud, since I'm not actually dead. But if you do that, I'll release Tyler's complete financial records, showing exactly how he spent my stolen money. I'll release the recordings I made of your conversations where you laughed about my diagnosis and planned to steal more from me after I died. I'll release the evidence of your other crimes, the ones the police haven't discovered yet. More importantly, I'll make sure Emma learns the complete truth about what kind of people her mother and brother really were. Right now, she's young enough to forget this nightmare and build a normal life with her father. But if you force me to defend myself in court, I'll make sure she knows exactly what you did and why you did it. The choice is yours, daughter. You can accept your punishment and disappear quietly, or you can fight me and lose everything you have left, including Emma's chance at a normal life. I'd suggest you choose wisely. You've already seen what happens when you underestimate me. Your loving mother, Martha Freeman, who is no longer your mother in any way that matters. P.S. I did beat the cancer, by the way. Private treatment in Mexico, Paid for with the money I got from selling everything you thought you'd inherit. The doctors say I have at least 10 more years. I plan to spend every one of them making sure you never forget what you cost me. Asterisk. Lily's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the letter. Her mother was alive. Her mother had orchestrated everything: Tyler's death, her own destruction, the complete annihilation of their family. She drove to the storage unit with tears streaming down her face. Inside, she found boxes of evidence that made her blood run cold. Photos of her and Tyler from their surveillance. Recordings of their phone conversations. Financial records showing exactly how they'd spent the stolen money. And most damning of all, video footage of Tyler making the deal with Castellano that had ultimately gotten him killed. Her mother had orchestrated Tyler's murder. Not directly, but by ensuring that his creditors would see him as a flight risk who needed to be dealt with immediately. At the bottom of the last box was a manila envelope labeled for Lily's decision. Inside were 2 sets of documents. The first was a complete confession, written in Martha's handwriting, admitting to everything she'd done and explaining her motives. If Lily gave this to the police, it would be enough to have her mother arrested and probably convicted. The second set of documents was far more devastating. They contained evidence of Lily's crimes that hadn't been discovered yet, additional tax fraud, insurance fraud, and most damaging of all, medical malpractice that had resulted in serious injuries to several clients. Women who'd been too ashamed or intimidated to report their injuries, but who'd been secretly documented by Martha's investigators. If this evidence was released, Lily wouldn't just go to prison for the crimes she'd already been charged with. She'd face additional charges that could put her away for decades. But the most heartbreaking item in the envelope was a letter from Emma, written in her childish handwriting. "Mommy, I hope you get better soon. Daddy says you did something bad, but I know you're still good inside. I love you even though everyone says you're a bad person. Please don't do any more bad things so you can come home." The letter was dated 3 weeks ago. Emma still loved her, still believed in her, still hoped for their relationship to be restored. If Lily went to war with her mother, Emma would learn things that would destroy even that fragile hope. If Lily went to war with her mother, Emma would learn things that would destroy even that fragile hope. Lily sat in the storage unit for hours, surrounded by the evidence of her family's complete destruction. Finally, as the sun was setting, she made her choice. She took the confession letter and burned it in the parking lot. She left everything else in the storage unit and drove home. 3 days later, she pled guilty to all charges against her and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. She gave no statement to the press, offered no explanation for her crimes, and never mentioned that her supposedly dead mother was actually alive and living freely somewhere else. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Lily looked directly into the courtroom camera and spoke the only words that mattered.
"I'm sorry, Emma.
Mommy made terrible choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. But I want you to know that the best part of me will always be the part that loves you. Try to remember that when you think of me." Emma, watching from the gallery with her father, started crying. Lily went to prison knowing she'd lost everything that mattered to her. Her daughter, her freedom, her future, her family, all gone because of a choice she'd made to steal from her dying mother. But she also went to prison knowing that her mother's revenge was complete. Martha Freeman had gotten exactly what she wanted: total victory over the family members who'd betrayed her. The only question remaining was whether revenge would be enough to satisfy the woman who'd once been a loving grandmother, or whether there was anything left of Martha's humanity after everything she'd done to reclaim her life. Freedom isn't just about escaping your cage. It's about becoming someone who is never caged at all. 6 months after Lily's sentencing, I stood on the deck of my new home in Mendocino, California, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The coastal air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt and redwoods. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever lived, and it was entirely mine. Margaret Ellis had built a good life for herself. I owned a small bookstore in town, specializing in rare books and literary first editions. The locals knew me as a quiet widow who'd moved west after her husband's death, someone who kept to herself but was always willing to help with community events. I volunteered at the library, donated to local charities, and had even started dating a retired professor named David who taught philosophy at the community college. No one in Mendocino knew about Martha Freeman. No one knew that the gentle woman who recommended novels and organized book clubs had orchestrated the complete destruction of her own family. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about what I'd done. But every time I considered it, I remembered Lily's words, "You're not going to survive anyway." I remember Tyler's laughter as he spent my cancer treatment money on cars and parties. I remembered the casual cruelty with which they dismissed my life. Any guilt I might have felt was overwhelmed by a sense of justice finally served. My cancer, meanwhile, was in complete remission. The experimental treatment I'd received at a private clinic in Tijuana had been expensive, but effective. The doctors there had given me a clean bill of health and a prognosis of many more years to come. I'd spent $42,000 of my own money to save my life, money I'd earned through careful saving and the sale of everything I'd owned as Martha Freeman. It was the best investment I'd ever made. The bookstore was thriving. I'd used my knowledge of rare books, acquired through years of reading and collecting, to build a business that attracted customers from all over Northern California. Literature professors, wealthy collectors, and dedicated readers all made pilgrimages to my shop to browse my carefully curated inventory. But the bookstore was more than just a business. It was my cover, my identity, my proof that Margaret Ellis was a real person living a real life.
And it was also my joy.
For the first time in decades, I was doing work that I loved, surrounded by books and ideas, and people who shared my passion for literature. David had been pursuing me for months before I finally agreed to have dinner with him. He was 72, a widower whose wife had died of Alzheimer's 3 years earlier. He was kind, intelligent, and patient with my obvious reluctance to get involved with anyone. "I get the feeling you've been hurt," he said during one of our early dinners. "Someone who mattered to you let you down badly." "Something like that," I replied. "Family?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. "Family can be the cruelest," he said gently. "They know exactly how to hurt us because they know exactly where we're vulnerable. But not all relationships are like that, Margaret. Some people actually mean it when they say they care about you." I was still learning to believe that. David introduced me to his adult children when they visited for Christmas. Sarah was a doctor in Seattle. Mark was an engineer in Portland, and both of them welcomed me warmly into their father's life. They seemed genuinely happy that their father had found companionship after their mother's death. "Dad's been different since he met you," Sarah told me privately. "Lighter. More like himself again." "Thank you for that." I almost cried. When was the last time someone had thanked me for bringing joy into their life instead of pain? But my new life wasn't just about healing and moving forward. I also kept careful track of what was happening to the family I'd left behind. Lily was serving her sentence at a federal prison in Ohio. According to my sources, she was a model prisoner, quiet, compliant, spending most of her time in the library. She'd earned her GED and was working toward a bachelor's degree in social work, apparently hoping to build a career helping troubled families when she was released. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma was thriving with her father. Richard had remarried, a kind woman named Susan who worked as a teacher and had embraced Emma as her own daughter. Emma was excelling in school, playing soccer, and from all appearances was recovering from the trauma of her early childhood. She wrote to her mother regularly, but never visited. The letters, which I intercepted through methods I'd learned during my months of surveillance, were sweet but distant. Emma still loved her mother, but she was also building a life that didn't depend on Lily's presence. That was probably for the best. I also kept track of Tyler's former friends and associates. Most of them had moved on, forgotten about the young man who died because of his own greed and stupidity. His girlfriend Jessica had graduated from college and moved to Chicago. His gambling buddies had found new victims to exploit. Even Castellano had moved on to other business ventures. Tyler Freeman had become a cautionary tale, a story people told about what happened when you betrayed family trust. But he wasn't a martyr or a victim in anyone's memory. He was simply someone who'd made catastrophic choices and paid the ultimate price, which was exactly how I wanted him to be remembered. One evening in March, almost a year after I'd begun my new life, David and I were having dinner at my house when he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Margaret, do you ever think about getting in touch with your family?" I nearly choked on my wine. "What do you mean?" "You've mentioned that you had a daughter and grandson back east. Don't you miss them? Don't you want them to know that you're doing well?" I set down my glass carefully. "David, some relationships are too damaged to repair. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. But family is family. Surely there's some way to—"
No.
The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "There's not." David looked surprised by my vehemence.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't mean to upset you." I took a deep breath, trying to find words that would explain without revealing too much. My daughter and grandson chose money over my life when I was at my most vulnerable. They betrayed me in ways that can't be forgiven or forgotten. As far as I'm concerned, they're not my family anymore. That's heartbreaking, Margaret. I can't imagine what they could have done to make you feel that way. I hope you never can imagine it, I said quietly. That night, lying alone in my bed, I thought about David's question. Did I miss them? Did I want them to know I was alive and well? The answer was complicated. I missed the people I'd thought they were. I missed the daughter who used to call me for advice, the grandson who used to hug me and tell me he loved me. But those people had been illusions, masks worn by individuals who saw me as nothing more than a source of money to be exploited. I didn't miss the Rael, Lily, and Tyler. I didn't regret what I'd done to them. And I certainly didn't want them to know that Martha Freeman was alive and living well while they suffered the consequences of their choices. My revenge had been perfect because it was complete. They believed their victim was dead, that their crimes had gone unpunished, that only bad luck and poor choices had destroyed their lives. They'd never know that every disaster had been carefully orchestrated by the woman they'd betrayed. That ignorance was part of their punishment. But sometimes, late at night, I wondered what would have happened if they'd made different choices. If Lily had supported me instead of enabling Tyler's theft. If Tyler had confessed and tried to make amends instead of lying and spending my money on luxuries. Would I have forgiven them? Would Martha Freeman still be alive, fighting cancer with her family's support? I'd never know because they'd never given me that option. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine in response. The difference was that my choices had led to freedom, health, prosperity, and the possibility of new love. Their choices had led to prison, death, and the loss of everything they'd held dear. Justice, it seemed, had its own sense of irony. But as I drifted off to sleep in my beautiful home by the sea, surrounded by books and possibilities and the promise of tomorrow, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years.
Peace.
Not the peace of someone who'd given up, but the peace of someone who'd fought for her life and won. Margaret Ellis slept well that night, and every night after. Martha Freeman's granddaughter might never know her grandmother had survived, but Margaret Ellis was living proof that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. The past has a way of finding us, even when we think we've buried it completely. 2 years into my new life, I thought I was safe. I thought Martha Freeman was truly dead and buried, that Margaret Ellis was my complete and permanent identity. I thought I'd achieved the perfect escape. I was wrong. It started with a phone call to the bookstore on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November. I was helping a customer find a first edition Steinbeck when the phone rang. Mendocino Rare Books. This is Margaret. Hello, Margaret. Or should I say Martha? My blood turned to ice. The voice was unfamiliar, but the knowledge behind it was unmistakably dangerous. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number. I don't think so. Martha Freeman, age 77, supposedly died of cancer 2 years ago in Michigan. Except she didn't die at all, did she? She just moved to California and opened a bookstore. I gestured to my customer that I needed privacy and stepped into the back office, closing the door behind me. Who is this? My name is Detective Ray Morrison, Michigan State Police. I've been investigating the Tyler Freeman murder case, and some very interesting information has come to light. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Margaret Ellis. I've never heard of Tyler Freeman. Really? Because I have bank records showing that Margaret Ellis received a substantial wire transfer from the estate sale of Martha Freeman's property. I have phone records connecting Margaret Ellis to Marcus Webb, a private investigator who specializes in helping people disappear. And most interesting of all, I have testimony from a woman named Emma Morrison, that's Tyler Freeman's half-sister, who says her grandmother Martha had distinctive scars on her left hand from a childhood accident. I looked down at my left hand. The scars from when I grabbed a hot pan at age 8 were still visible, 2 small white lines across my palm. Detective Morrison, I think there's been some confusion. Ms. Freeman, I'm not calling to arrest you. At least, not yet. I'm calling because I need information about what really happened to Tyler Freeman, and I think you might be the only person who can give it to me. I told you I don't know. Martha, please. I know you're alive. I know you faked your death. I know you had every reason to want revenge against the people who stole your cancer treatment money. What I don't know is whether you directly caused Tyler's death or just created the circumstances that led to it. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking rapidly. How much did he actually know? How much could he prove? And most importantly, what did he want? Hypothetically, I said carefully, what would be the difference legally between murder and, let's call it aggressive karma? The difference could be life in prison versus no charges at all. It depends on intent and direct action. I see. Martha, and I'm going to call you Martha, because we both know that's who you really are. I've been a cop for 28 years. I've seen a lot of cases where good people do bad things because they've been pushed beyond their breaking point. I've also seen cases where genuinely evil people manipulate circumstances to hurt others while keeping their own hands technically clean. Which category do you think I fall into? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Will you meet with me? Off the record, just the two of us. I'm driving down from Michigan tomorrow. We could meet somewhere private, talk this through. I closed my eyes. My perfect new life was crashing down around me, and I had to decide whether to keep running or finally face the consequences of what I'd done. There's a coffee shop called the Daily Grind on Main Street, I said finally. I'll be there at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be wearing a blue scarf. Thank you, Martha. I'll see you then. After I hung up, I sat in my office chair for a long time, staring at the rain running down the windows. I'd always known this day might come. I'd hoped it wouldn't, but I'd known it was possible. The question now was what to do about it. I could run again. I had enough money saved to disappear completely, maybe leave the country, start over somewhere else. But I was tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of being afraid that my past would catch up with me. Maybe it was time to face the truth of what I'd done. That evening, I called David and told him I had a family emergency and might need to go away for a while. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked, his voice full of concern. Just, if something happens to me, if I have to leave suddenly, I want you to know that meeting you has been one of the best things that ever happened to me. You reminded me that I could be loved for who I am, not what I could provide. Margaret, you're scaring me. What's going on? I can't explain right now. But David, whatever you hear about me in the coming days or weeks, remember that I never meant to hurt anyone who didn't hurt me first. I don't understand. I hope you never have to. The next afternoon, I sat in the daily grind wearing my blue scarf, waiting for Detective Morrison. He arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, a tall, thin man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. He looked like someone who'd seen too much human ugliness and was weary from carrying that knowledge. He ordered coffee and sat across from me in a corner booth where we couldn't easily be overheard. "Thank you for coming, Martha. You seem very sure that's my name." He smiled grimly. "I am. The question is whether you're ready to be honest with me about what you did. That depends on what you're prepared to do with that honesty." Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You're not what I expected. When I started investigating this case, I thought I was looking for a victim, a dying old woman who'd been robbed by her own family. What I found instead was someone who'd orchestrated one of the most sophisticated revenge schemes I've ever encountered. Tell me what you think you know. I know you faked your death with help from Marcus Webb. I know you liquidated all your assets and transferred the money to your new identity. I know you spent months systematically destroying Tyler and Lily Freeman's lives through social media manipulation, financial sabotage, and psychological warfare." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "What I want to know is whether you specifically arranged for Tyler to be killed by his creditors, or whether you just created circumstances that made his death likely." I looked out the window at the people walking by on Main Street. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were passing by a woman who'd orchestrated her own family's destruction. Detective Morrison, if I were to hypothetically answer that question, what assurance would I have that my response wouldn't be used against me?
None.
I'm not offering you immunity. I'm not making any deals. I'm just trying to understand what happened so I can decide whether to pursue charges. And if I don't cooperate, then I'll pursue charges anyway, based on the evidence I already have. Financial fraud, faking your death, conspiracy to commit various crimes. You'd probably be looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. I nodded. I'd expected as much. Detective, can I ask you something? Do you have children? 2 daughters. Both grown now. If one of your daughters stole your life savings while you were dying of cancer, if she enabled that theft and then told you to get over it because you were going to die anyway, what would you do? Morrison's expression hardened. I'd be angry, furious. But I wouldn't fake my death and orchestrate a revenge campaign that resulted in someone's murder. Wouldn't you? Are you absolutely certain of that? He was quiet for a moment. I'd like to think I wouldn't. I'd like to think I wouldn't have either. But when someone takes everything from you, your money, your chance at survival, your dignity, your trust, when they do that and then mock you for being upset about it, something inside you breaks, detective. And once it's broken, you're capable of things you never imagined. So, you did arrange Tyler's death? I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. I didn't arrange Tyler's death, Detective Morrison. But I did arrange the circumstances that made it inevitable. I made sure his creditors knew he was planning to leave town. I made sure they understood he was never going to pay them back. I made sure they saw him as a flight risk who needed to be dealt with immediately. I didn't arrange Tyler's death, Detective Morrison. But I did arrange the circumstances that made it inevitable. I made sure his creditors knew he was planning to leave town. I made sure they understood he was never going to pay them back. I made sure they saw him as a flight risk who needed to be dealt with immediately. And you knew what would happen when you did that? I knew it was likely. Tyler owed money to very dangerous people. When you owe that kind of money and you try to run, well, people like Castellano don't generally forgive and forget. Morrison made notes in a small notebook. So, you facilitated murder without actually committing it. I created consequences for Tyler's choices. He chose to steal from me. He chose to gamble with dangerous people. He chose to brag about his crimes. He chose to try to escape his debts by fleeing the state. I just accelerated the timeline. And Lily? What about what you did to her? Lily made her own choices too. She chose to help Tyler steal from me. She chose to mock my illness. She chose to tell me I should just die quietly so they could inherit my money. Everything that happened to her was a direct result of those choices. But you orchestrated her downfall. I exposed her crimes. The tax evasion, the unlicensed medical procedures, the fraud, those were all real. I just made sure the right people found out about them. Morrison closed his notebook and leaned forward. Martha, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen victims become perpetrators, and I've seen perpetrators claim to be victims. What makes your case unusual is that you were genuinely both. What does that mean for me? It means I have a choice to make. I can arrest you for financial fraud and conspiracy, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Or I can decide that justice has already been served and close this case as an unsolved murder with no viable suspects. Which are you going to choose? Morrison stood up, leaving money on the table for his coffee. I'm going to go back to my hotel room and think about it. I'm going to think about what I would have done in your situation. I'm going to think about whether the world is a better or worse place with Tyler Freeman dead and Lily Freeman in prison. And I'm going to think about whether prosecuting a dying woman who fought back against the people who stole her last hope is really how I want to end my career. I'm not dying anymore, Detective. The cancer is gone. He paused at that. Good for you, Martha. I'm glad you got to spend your stolen money on something worthwhile. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching the rain and wondering if this was my last day of freedom. I thought about calling Marcus Webb, asking him to help me disappear again. I thought about running to Mexico or Canada or somewhere else where Detective Morrison couldn't reach me. But I was tired of running. If Morrison decided to arrest me, I'd face the consequences. I'd spent 2 years living with the knowledge of what I'd done. Maybe it was time to let the rest of the world judge whether my actions had been justified. That evening, David came over with dinner and wine, trying to cheer me up after my mysterious family emergency. You seem different tonight, he said as we sat on my deck watching the sunset. Calmer somehow, like you've made peace with something. Maybe I have. Want to talk about it? I looked at this kind, gentle man who'd brought joy back into my life, and I realized I owed him the truth. Or, at least as much of it as I could safely share. David, what would you say if I told you that I wasn't entirely who you think I am? He smiled. I'd say, I already know that. Everyone has secrets, Margaret. Everyone has parts of their past they'd rather not discuss. What matters is who you are now with me in this moment. And if those secrets were significant? How significant are we talking? Secret addiction? A criminal past? Witness protection? I almost laughed at how close he'd come to the truth. Something like that. David set down his wine glass and took my hand. Margaret, I fell in love with the woman who recommends books to shy teenagers and organizes charity drives for the animal shelter. I fell in love with the woman who makes me laugh and challenges me to think and holds my hand during scary movies. Whatever happened before I met you, that's your business. Unless it's going to put us in danger, I don't need to know. And if it might put us in danger, then we'll face it together. I squeezed his hand, feeling tears start to form in my eyes. This was what love looked like. Not the conditional, transactional affection I'd received from Lily and Tyler, but genuine care for another person's well-being. I love you too, David. More than I thought I could love anyone again. Then that's all that matters. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Tomorrow, Detective Morrison would make his decision about my fate. Tomorrow, I might be arrested and charged with conspiracy and fraud. Tomorrow, my perfect new life might come crashing down. But tonight, I was Margaret Ellis, sitting on her deck with the man she loved, watching the ocean and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in years. Whatever tomorrow brought, I'd had this moment. And after everything I'd been through, that felt like enough. True victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about becoming someone they could never touch. Detective Morrison never came to arrest me. 3 days after our meeting, I received a brief phone call from him. Martha, I've decided to close the Tyler Freeman case as an unsolved murder. The official finding is that he was killed by unknown parties in connection with gambling debts. No charges will be filed against you.
Why?
I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Because I spent 30 years putting bad people in prison, and you're not a bad person. You're someone who was pushed too far and pushed back. The world isn't worse off without Tyler Freeman in it, and it's not worse off with you living free in California. What about the fraud charges? Faking my death. What fraud? Martha Freeman died of cancer, just like her obituary said. Margaret Ellis is a different person entirely, a widow who moved to California to start over. I can't find any connection between the two. I understood. He was giving me a gift, the chance to stay buried as Martha Freeman and live freely as Margaret Ellis. Thank you, Detective. Don't thank me. Just try to use your remaining years for something good. You've proven you're capable of remarkable things when you put your mind to it. Maybe focus that energy on creation instead of destruction. I will. And Martha? For what it's worth, I think your family got what they deserved. After he hung up, I sat in my bookstore office and cried. Not from sadness or relief, but from a profound sense of closure. The past was finally, truly buried. Martha Freeman was officially dead, and Margaret Ellis was free to live without looking over her shoulder. That evening, I told David everything. Well, almost everything. I told him about the cancer diagnosis, about Lily and Tyler stealing my treatment money, about their cruel dismissal of my life. I told him about faking my death and starting over in California. I told him about the detective who'd tracked me down and ultimately decided not to prosecute. What I didn't tell him was the specific details of how Tyler had died, or exactly how extensively I'd orchestrated their downfall. Some truths were too dark to share, even with someone who loved me. David listened without judgment, holding my hand as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry you went through that, he said finally. No one should have to choose between trusting their family and protecting their own life. Are you angry that I lied to you about who I was? You didn't lie about who you were. You just didn't tell me who you used to be. And honestly, Margaret, I prefer the woman you became to the woman you described being before. What do you mean? The Martha you described sounds like someone who gave too much, trusted too easily, put everyone else's needs ahead of her own. The Margaret I know is strong, independent, capable of standing up for herself. I like that better. I leaned into his embrace, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. Does this change anything between us? I asked. Only if you want it to. I love you, Margaret Ellis. I love the woman you chose to become, and I love the life you've built for yourself. Your past doesn't scare me, even knowing what I'm capable of. David smiled. Especially knowing what you're capable of. Anyone who tries to hurt you or the people you love will have to deal with both of us. 6 months later, David proposed. We were married in a small ceremony on the beach behind my house, with only a few close friends in attendance. I wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. David's children gave speeches about how happy they were that their father had found love again. It was nothing like my first wedding to Robert, which had been a large, traditional affair with all our families present. This was better, more intimate, more authentic, more truly mine. For our honeymoon, we traveled to Europe for 3 weeks, visiting bookstores and libraries in London, Paris, and Rome. I bought rare books for my shop, and David researched articles for the philosophy journal he contributed to. We walked through ancient cities hand in hand, talking about literature and life and the future we were building together. I was happier than I'd ever been. Back home, my business continued to thrive. Word spread about the knowledgeable woman who ran Mendocino Rare Books, and I began getting customers from as far away as Los Angeles and Seattle. I expanded the shop, adding a small cafe where people could drink coffee and read. David helped me set up book clubs and author readings. The community embraced us as a couple. We were invited to dinner parties, included in local events, treated as valued members of the town. Nobody questioned Margaret Ellis's background or wondered about her past. To everyone who mattered, I was simply a successful businesswoman who'd found love later in life. But I didn't forget where I'd come from or what I'd learned about the importance of justice. I began quietly helping other people who'd been betrayed by their families. A woman whose son had emptied her retirement account. An elderly man whose daughter was stealing his Social Security checks. A widow whose stepchildren were trying to contest her husband's will. I didn't offer revenge. I offered something better. Resources, connections, legal advice, financial assistance. I helped people protect themselves and fight back against those who would exploit them. I funded a legal clinic that specialized in elder abuse cases. I donated anonymously to organizations that help seniors navigate financial exploitation. I used my network of contacts from my revenge days to expose scammers and con artists who targeted vulnerable people. It wasn't dramatic or violent or even particularly satisfying in the immediate sense. But it was meaningful work that used my skills and resources to make the world a little bit better. One day, about 3 years after Detective Morrison's visit, I received an unexpected letter. It was forwarded through several mail services with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Dear Margaret Ellis, I don't know if this letter will reach you, and I don't know if you'll read it if it does. But I needed to try to communicate with you, even if I'm not sure you really exist. My name is Emma Morrison. I was Emma Freeman before my father adopted me after my mother went to prison. I'm 16 now, and I've been thinking a lot about my family and what happened to us. I know my mother and my half-brother Tyler did something terrible to my grandmother Martha. I know they stole her money when she was sick, and I know that's why she died. I know my mother went to prison and Tyler died because of the choices they made. But I also know that my grandmother was a good person who didn't deserve what happened to her. And I know that she loved me, even if she didn't love my mother and Tyler anymore. A few months ago, I was cleaning out some of my mother's things that my father had stored in our garage. I found a box of my grandmother's belongings, photo albums, letters, recipes, things like that. There was also a bank statement from an account I'd never heard of, with a balance of over $60,000. The account was in the name of someone called Margaret Ellis. I don't know who Margaret Ellis is, but I have a feeling she might know something about my grandmother. Or maybe she was a friend of my grandmother's. Or maybe she asked my grandmother, somehow. If Margaret Ellis is reading this, I want her to know that Emma Morrison, who used to be Emma Freeman, is doing well. I'm getting good grades, I play soccer, I have friends who care about me. My father and stepmother love me and take good care of me. I'm going to study social work in college because I want to help families who are in trouble. I also want Margaret Ellis to know that I don't blame my grandmother for whatever happened to my mother and Tyler. They made their own choices, and they had to live with the consequences. My grandmother was the victim, not them. If Margaret Ellis is really my grandmother, I want her to know that I love her. I understand why she couldn't stay in our family after what happened. I understand why she might have needed to become someone else. And I hope she's happy wherever she is. If Margaret Ellis is just someone who knew my grandmother, I hope she'll remember her kindly. Martha Freeman was a good person who deserved better than what she got from her family. Either way, I hope this letter finds someone who cares. Love always. Emma Morrison. who will always remember being Emma Freeman, granddaughter of Martha Freeman. Asterisk. I read the letter 3 times before the tears made it impossible to continue.
Emma.
My beautiful, innocent Emma, who'd been caught in the crossfire of her family's destruction but had somehow emerged whole and healthy and kind. She knew. Somehow, she'd figured out that Margaret Ellis and Martha Freeman were the same person. And instead of being angry or afraid, she was reaching out with love and understanding. I showed the letter to David that evening. "Are you going to respond?" he asked after reading it. "I don't know.
Part of me wants to.
She sounds like she's become a wonderful young woman. But another part of me thinks it's better to leave the past buried." What does your heart tell you? I thought about that for a long time. What did my heart tell me? It told me that Emma was the one truly innocent victim in this whole story. She'd lost her grandmother, her mother, and her half-brother because of choices other people had made. She'd been forced to grow up with the knowledge that her family was broken beyond repair. But it also told me that she'd survived and thrived despite everything. She had a loving father, a good stepmother, bright prospects for the future. She didn't need the complicated truth about what her grandmother had become. I wrote back, but not as Margaret Ellis. I wrote as someone who had known Martha Freeman and wanted Emma to know how proud her grandmother would be of the young woman she'd become. "Dear Emma, your letter found its way to me, and I wanted you to know that Martha Freeman often spoke of you with tremendous love and pride. She worried about you when everything fell apart with your family, but she would be so happy to know how well you're doing. Your grandmother was indeed a good person who found herself in impossible circumstances. She made some difficult choices in her final months, but everything she did was motivated by a desire for justice and a hope that the people she loved would be protected from future harm. I know she would want you to continue building the good life you've created with your father and stepmother. She would want you to study social work and help other families avoid the kind of pain yours experienced. She would want you to be happy and successful and surrounded by people who truly care about you. Most of all, she would want you to know that none of what happened was your fault, and that you carry the best parts of her legacy forward in your kindness, intelligence, and strength. Live well, Emma. Make choices that honor the love your grandmother had for you, and know that somewhere, she is proud of the remarkable young woman you've become. With love and best wishes for your bright future, a friend who remembers Martha Freeman fondly, asterisk. I never heard from Emma again, but I kept track of her through discreet inquiries. She graduated high school with honors, earned a full scholarship to study social work at the University of Michigan, and eventually became a counselor specializing in family crisis intervention. She married a good man, had 2 children, and from all appearances built exactly the kind of life Martha Freeman would have wanted for her granddaughter. Sometimes I wondered if I should have told her the truth, should have revealed that her grandmother was alive and well and living in California. But I decided that some gifts are best given anonymously. Emma had found peace by believing her grandmother was dead, but proud of her. That peace was worth more than the complicated truth about Margaret Ellis. 10 years after faking my death, I stood in my bookstore on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, arranging a display of new arrivals. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see a young woman with familiar eyes enter the shop. For a moment, my heart stopped. She looked so much like Lily at that age, but with a kindness in her expression that Lily had never possessed. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the counter. "I'm looking for a gift for my father. He loves philosophy books, especially anything about ethics and moral decision-making."
Emma.
26 years old now, more beautiful than ever, standing 3 feet away from the grandmother she thought was dead. "I have some excellent options," I managed to say, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What's your budget?" We spent 20 minutes discussing books. She was intelligent, thoughtful, clearly well-educated and well-raised. She chose a first edition copy of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, saying her father would appreciate both the content and the historical significance. As I wrapped the book, she made casual conversation. "This is such a lovely shop. Have you been here long?" "About 10 years. I moved here from back east after my husband died." "I'm sorry for your loss. It must have been hard to start over in a new place." "It was. But sometimes starting over is exactly what you need." She smiled. "I can understand that. I changed my name when I was younger, not legally, just personally. Sometimes you need to become someone new to heal from old wounds." I handed her the wrapped book, our fingers briefly touching as she took it. "Your father is lucky to have a daughter who knows him well enough to choose such a thoughtful gift. He's a good man. He saved me from a really difficult situation when I was young. I owe him everything." "Family isn't always about blood," I said carefully. "Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most." "Exactly." She paused at the door, looking back at me. "Thank you for your help. I hope I'll see you again sometime." "I hope so, too." After she left, I sat down heavily in the chair behind my counter. I'd been in the same room as Emma, had spoken with her, had seen the remarkable woman she'd become. And she'd had no idea she was talking to her supposedly dead grandmother. It was simultaneously heartbreaking and perfect. That evening, I told David about the encounter. "Do you regret not telling her who you were?" he asked.
No. She's happy. She's healthy.
"She has a life full of people who love her and support her. What would be gained by disrupting that with the truth about Margaret Ellis and Martha Freeman?" "But don't you want her to know you're alive? Don't you want a relationship with her?" I thought about that question for a long time. "I have a relationship with her," I said finally. "Not the relationship Martha Freeman might have had, but the one Margaret Ellis can have. I know she's doing well. I know she's happy. I know she grew up to be exactly the kind of person I hoped she would become. That's enough." "Is it really?" "David, the greatest gift I can give Emma is the freedom to live her life without the complications of her family's past. She thinks her grandmother died loving her, and her grandmother did die loving her. Martha Freeman's love for Emma was real and pure and uncomplicated by everything that came after." "And Margaret Ellis's love?" I smiled. "Margaret Ellis's love is the kind that protects from a distance, that celebrates her successes and wishes her well, that takes satisfaction in knowing she turned out beautifully despite everything. It's a different kind of love, but it's just as real." That night, I updated my will to include a substantial trust fund for Emma's children, Martha Freeman's great-grandchildren, who would never know where the money came from but would benefit from their great-grandmother's final gift. I also established a scholarship in Martha Freeman's name at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, where Emma had studied. The scholarship would help other young people who'd overcome family trauma to build careers helping others. It wasn't the ending Martha Freeman had imagined for her story, but it was the ending Margaret Ellis had chosen, and it felt right. 15 years after my supposed death, I celebrated my 90th birthday with David, his children, and a small group of close friends from Mendocino. I was healthy, happy, and surrounded by people who loved me for who I'd chosen to become rather than who I'd been born to be. That night, as David and I sat on our deck watching the stars, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Martha Freeman had been betrayed, robbed, abandoned, and left to die by the people she'd loved most. But Martha Freeman had also been someone who'd allowed herself to be victimized, who'd given endlessly without protecting herself, who'd confused love with enabling. Margaret Ellis was different. She was someone who'd learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's just martyrdom. She was someone who understood that some people will take everything you're willing to give and still demand more. She was someone who knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away and let people face the consequences of their choices. Martha Freeman had died in anguish, believing her family had chosen money over her life. Margaret Ellis lived in peace, knowing she'd chosen her own life over their betrayal. It had taken me 15 years to understand the difference, but now I did. Revenge wasn't about destroying the people who'd hurt me. Revenge was about refusing to let their actions define the rest of my story. Revenge was about becoming someone they could never touch, never diminish, never defeat. Revenge was about living well. And by that measure, Martha Freeman's revenge was complete. As for Margaret Ellis, she was just beginning to understand what it meant to truly live. The stars wheeled overhead, the ocean whispered against the shore, and I held my husband's hand in the darkness, grateful for every moment of the life I'd fought so hard to claim. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my beautiful home, go to my thriving business, and continue building the community I'd found in Mendocino. I would recommend books to eager readers, mentor young entrepreneurs, and support causes that helped people protect themselves from those who would exploit them. I would live as Margaret Ellis, the woman I'd chosen to become, and I would be happy. Martha Freeman's journey had ended in betrayal and death. Margaret Ellis's journey was just beginning, and this time I was writing the story myself. The best stories don't end, they transform into new beginnings. 20 years after Martha Freeman's death, Emma Morrison published a book about her experience growing up in a family destroyed by financial elder abuse. When Trust Dies, A Granddaughter's Story became a bestseller and helped change legislation around elder financial protection. In her acknowledgments, Emma wrote, "To my grandmother Martha Freeman, who loved us even when we didn't deserve it, and who I hope found peace in her final days. And to the mysterious friend who wrote to me years ago to tell me how proud she would be. Thank you for helping me understand that love can transcend death and that the best way to honor someone's memory is to become the person they believed you could be." Margaret Ellis read those words in her bookstore one quiet morning and smiled. The circle was complete. Love had indeed transcended death, just not in the way Emma imagined. And Martha Freeman's granddaughter had become exactly the person her grandmother had always believed she could be. Sometimes, the greatest victory is knowing when your work is done. Sometimes, the most perfect revenge is a life so well lived that your enemies become irrelevant. And sometimes, the best ending is really just the beginning of something even more beautiful. Margaret Ellis closed the book, placed it carefully on her shelf of treasured volumes, and went to help a customer who was looking for a story about second chances. She had quite a few recommendations. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength, if it showed you that it's never too late to reclaim your life, then please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more resilient than anyone who has ever underestimated you. Your journey isn't over. It's just beginning. Until next time, this is Her Journey, reminding you that every ending is really just a new beginning in disguise.